On today's episode, your Spartan Utah and US Championship Series recap. Welcome to the OCR Report podcast, brought to you by the OCRReport.com. We are the only podcast to focus exclusively on the elite sport of obstacle course racing, from Spartan to Tough Mudder to the OCR World Championships, and wherever the elites are racing, we are there. My name is Will Hicks, and this is the OCR Report. Jack Bauer, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Will. How do you think Utah went?
It was a great race. I pulled it up on YouTube on my Apple TV, watched it on the big screen like a race should be done, and had a good time. What'd you think?
I thought the coverage was honestly pretty good. I know a lot of people have not been fans of having that 1 day delay, but I really think it makes a big difference as opposed to seeing some of the, shaky cell phone footage that doesn't get good reception in the woods. I would much rather see a good compiled product versus like a sketchy day of one. I know a lot of people, if it's like a boxing fight, like they're like, I have to get the pay-per-view that day. But does it really matter if you watch it the next morning? Like, you're going to know the result, but it's going to be just as good the next day. So I would rather see a better video quality than have to see it live.
You know what? I've kind of come around to the same point of view. I've only actually sat on my couch and watched it live, maybe last year, I guess, only 2 or 3 times. Usually it'll be later in the day or the next day or even like Monday night for me this week. Something else.
And if you're the casual fan, you're probably not, like, say that it's an East Coast race, Alabama or Jacksonville. You live in California, you're not going to wake up at 4:30 just to watch some, unclear cell phone video quality. Like, who wants to do that on a Saturday at 4:30 in the morning? So I'd much rather watch it at your own convenience. And yeah, the results, but you can stay off social media for a day. It's not impossible. Like, you don't have to know the results going into it. And I just think that they did a good balance between the men and the women instead of just focusing on the men from the start and then showing the women once the first guy finishes. Like, they had a pretty good balance throughout the race, in my opinion. There's
a part, I don't know exactly what the timestamp would be, but it seemed like we were on the women for like half an hour or 40 minutes. And I was like, this is the longest, like, uninterrupted stretch of just covering the women's race that I think they've had all year. Something else that I thought when I was watching it, Kevin Donahue and David Magida, the two broadcasters, they're both firmly entrenched in the Spartan community. Everyone knows them. They know everyone. They have gotten so much better than they were at the start of the year. At the beginning of the year, it was almost not painful, but it was. You could tell that they were new at it, even though they'd done it before. And Magida had even done it on ESPN, I think. But they have gotten so much better, especially like Kevin Donahue. Anyway, I'm very impressed with. They're doing a great job. Kudos to both those guys.
I think it's very noticeable when you have someone who knows the sport versus an outsider. I don't know if you saw the award ceremony after the race. They had Matt B. Davis had some Instagram videos just kind of showing the podium and stuff. And the guy who was the MC for the Utah event, he asked Johnny Luna-Lima what his name was. It's like, are you kidding me? You work for Spartan and you don't know the guy who's won the 2 biggest races of the year back-to-back times? Like, and you're asking how to say his name. And he didn't know who Tyler Veerman was. He asked Ryan Atkins if he was Ryan Atkins. That doesn't look good. But when you have someone like David Magida or Kevin Donahue, who's been there from basically the beginning and clearly has a good interest in it. David has a degree in broadcasting, I believe, and I know Kevin Donahue. He's significantly improved behind the mic, just like you said. I think they're a good tandem, and obviously throwing it to Steve Hammond out in the field, you have a bunch of people who really care what they're doing, and it's a really good look when you have that.
Yeah, so I think Spartans definitely. I did not see the podium stuff you're talking about. That's unfortunate, but other than that, I think Spartans done a good job.
Yep, I agree, and I think that it will be really interesting once Tahoe rolls around. I think that the two of them would make a good tandem again. I mentioned it earlier, David Dietrich over in Europe. I know there are a lot of international racers, and I feel like he did a really good job at the European Championship coverage. He had a kind of difficult pairing with the other broadcaster he was with for the most part. But I think that once it was him and David Watson later in the race, that he really had a good perspective. And I think that since Tahoe is not all about the U.S. racers, you're having a lot of international coverage. I think that having the three of them in the booth would be a really, really good idea.
That'd be good. I hope for Tahoe they can get to some kind of happy medium where we can actually watch the race live, and then maybe it's. It's tough to. There's not a lot of even Instagram stories like you got to watch just kind of like athletes who are there or family members of athletes who are there the morning of. It'd be nice if they can do both for Tahoe.
Especially since it's on a Sunday, the video is going to come out on a Monday, so that'll be kind of a lot of people won't have that freedom of Sunday typically for these races that they've had so far. So they might have to wait until after work on Monday. But I think that, if they keep up the trend that they've been going at, it's a much, much improved experience for the viewer.
What did you think of the actual race? Why don't we start with the men?
Yeah, so I'm assuming you saw the final outcome?
I did. Yeah, spoilers in case you haven't seen the race, obviously.
Yeah, you probably shouldn't listen to this podcast. But Johnny Luna-Lima, he's for real. Everyone, Mappy Davis gave him I don't know if he came up with it or he just liked it a lot and he promoted the nickname, but he calls him the Descender, and I think that's a pretty appropriate nickname because the guy is just an animal on the downhills.
After he won the last race in the series, the fourth race in the series, I remember saying like, "Well, it was the race of his life," and we were kind of surprised. But when you and I were talking last week. I didn't even pick Johnny Luna-Lima to finish on the podium. I
was nervous about his ankle. I was because he pulled out of a sky race beforehand. I didn't think Big Bear was a fluke at all. You don't run a course like that. Just, I had a good day. That is not a good day. You are 100% ready for that type of performance if you win that race. And I just wasn't too sure of his health at the time. But man, if I had to pick the podium right now at Tahoe, he would be one of those three.
It's going to be fun to watch. We're kind of getting our head ourselves talking about next year, but between Ryan Atkins, who's always been great and always, we plan on him being great, Johnny Luna-Lima, who's kind of coming to his own these last two races, and then Ryan Kempson, who we've kind of forgotten about, but he started the season strong with the win. Those three guys could make some noise next year. I
hope that people stop calling Ryan Kempson just like a short course specialist. Like he got fourth at Big Bear. He won at Jacksonville Super. He just got fourth at Utah. He's had some third in Alabama. He didn't have the best showing in Seattle, but the guy's not just a short course runner. And I mean, he's just proven it, taking down huge names and just sticking with the pack all year. And this race, I believe he was in like 13th place at one point, and then he ended up finishing fourth. So he had an incredible performance in the second half. Actually, I'm looking at the stats right now in terms of the fastest splits from roughly the 40-minute mark to about an hour 10 into the race. So it was a 27-minute section, and that was basically beater to the bucket carry. So you start going downhill. He was only 23 seconds slower than Johnny Luna-Lima. He was about 45 seconds faster than Atkins. Ryan Kempson had the second fastest downhill split of the day, and that was after he had a pretty, by his standards, a bad climb where he was sitting in 13th place. He made up 9 positions during that 27 minutes on the downhill. So Tahoe, watch out. I mean, it's all downhill, and he was only 23 seconds slower than Johnny Luna-Lima on that same section. So the guy can fly, and he was faster than Atkins and a bunch of other these downhill specialists. So I think that just shows you right there he's going to be a top 5, top 3 threat for Tahoe for sure. So we mentioned Johnny Luna-Lima with his descent skills. Do you think the descending is what gave him the edge over Ryan Atkins? Honestly, I looked at the stats. He was in 10th place. The first timing mat checkpoint was about 11 minutes into the race. Atkins and Tyler Veerman and a few other guys were in the low 11-minute range. Johnny Luna-Lima at that point was 35 seconds back. From barbed wire to beater, which was like the main uphill section to the top of the hill, Johnny Luna-Lima actually had the fastest split. So he was the fastest uphill runner starting at 10 minutes into the race, or 11, and the fastest downhill runner by 30 seconds on each one of those. So it's not just the descending. He was the best climber. So that is just a scary combo when you think about it. The race was at elevation, long uphill, long downhill. That is right there with what Tahoe is. So I think that, is this man's weakness? Like, the only thing that could go wrong at this point on courses like this at altitude and having that big long uphill and big long downhill would be if he misses a spear. But he had the fastest uphill and the fastest downhill of the day. That's just a scary combo.
You know, if you're faster than them going uphill and you're faster than them going downhill, you're not leaving the other guys a lot of room to beat you.
No, not at all. And he was 30 seconds faster than Robert Killian and 40 seconds faster than Ryan Atkins. Everyone else was at least a minute slower on the uphill. On the downhill, Ryan Atkins was exactly a minute slower than Johnny Luna-Lima. And keep in mind that Johnny celebrated a little bit as he was going over the slip wall right before the finish line. So he just gapped the field like crazy. It's just incredible.
You know, the broadcasters kept referring to Ryan Atkins as Mr. Consistent, and that's kind of a boring nickname, but he does not finish, lower than second very often at all.
Do you want to know his entire U.S. series so far? He got second at Jacksonville, 52 seconds off the win. Second in Alabama, 48 seconds off the win. He won in Seattle. And then Big Bear was 3 minutes, 26 seconds off the win. Granted, that was a over 2 hour race, but that was his worst finish. This race in Utah, once again, less than a minute off the win. Like you nailed it. He's just Mr. Consistent. Who would you say has had the best season so far?
I'd say Ryan Atkins.
Okay, despite the fact that he only has one win and Johnny has two.
Oh, that's a good question. You know what? If I had to, honestly, Ryan Atkins has a fatter checkbook right now than Johnny Luna-Lima.
Yeah, he actually does. But I think we already talked about the flaws with the point series and how it's not as rewarding. But honestly, I would say that someone who gets second place or wins, and 3 of his second places were less than a minute off the win, and he wins another one, and he got second at the only other time that he was more than a minute off. That's the best season so far. I know Johnny obviously has had an incredible season so far, but he hasn't been as consistent as Ryan Atkins, in my opinion. I mean, he was in Jacksonville, he got 7th, and he was 3:18 off the win, and he was 14th place and over 5 minutes off the win in Alabama. So Atkins doesn't have performances like that. Nothing to take away from Johnny Luna-Lima, because let's be real, as we mentioned earlier, I would put him on as a podium pick right now for Tahoe. What would you?
Oh, absolutely. I think I'd look at Johnny Luna-Lima, I'd look at Atkins, and then if we're talking about Tahoe, I would put John Albin up there also.
Same here. Those would be my 3 at the moment. But and how crazy, Killian, he's finished top 3 in the past 4 years, and he almost got 3rd place. He missed his spear. He never misses obstacles, and he ended up having to do burpees just at the finish of the race in Utah because he missed his spear. So he's really close to being back to the normal Killian that most of us have come to expect.
I know a lot of people love the spear. I really don't like something that has an element of luck being so decisive to who wins the race. It had a huge effect on the women's race.
Well, yeah. So I was listening to David Watson on the European coverage a couple weeks ago, and he said if you are at the elite level, it's inexcusable to fail an obstacle no matter what. And I honestly totally agree with him. Like if you're throwing something 25 feet away, I understand not everyone grew up playing a ball sport or something, but not everyone grew up with just some of the random obstacle, whether it's twister or a multi. No one had that in their backyard, yet they learned how to do it. So I think that if you want to be legit, every single Spartan race is going to have a spear, and I think at this point, there's no excuse to miss it because it's always going to be there. And if that's what it comes down to at this point, it's mainly who can make their spear and who's the best downhill runner. That kind of seems to be what determines races these days. I don't think that you should be missing it if you're at the top.
You know what? In theory, I can see that argument, but some of them have bent tips, and some of them the ropes are shorter than others, and some of them, the guy in front of you, it's just there's the monkey bars are fair to everyone. Twister, beater, it's fair to everyone. The spear, it's like you have to go show up early the day before and pick the right lane. Actually, I wanted to ask you a question about spear strategy, and it kind of played out in the race yesterday. when they come into the race, they come into the spear obstacle, they're coming from the left to right. They can pick, any, I don't know if there are 10, 12 different spearmen to throw at. When you throw the spear, it has to stick and stay in the spearman until you pass. It has to stay in there at least until you pass the black flag exiting the obstacle, right? So why would you not take the furthest right spearman every single time so that as long as it sticks a little bit, you can run past that black flag and get out of there?
I totally agree. Every single obstacle that I do, as long as someone's not there, I run to the end because you have your fresh running legs. And once you get out of an obstacle, say that you're doing like Atlas Stone or something, you do your 5 burpees and then you have to get up and run. I would rather have run unbroken for that extra 50 feet to get towards the end of it instead of having to get up and run on little burpee fatigue legs and then try to cover that same little distance. It's only a couple seconds it'll cost you, but every single obstacle that I have a chance of doing, I would much rather go to the end. And I agree, same philosophy with the spear as well. Although, just like you mentioned, they're not all uniform. They had this spear throw was on an uphill. You saw that during the race, right?
Yeah. And
so what if your uphill was at a 10% grade and then the one four away from you was at an 8% grade? Is it really the same? Is it the same target that you're going at? What if some of them are in the sun, just like doing Z-Wall, or Olympus? Sometimes the sun is shining on a certain side of it and it's going to be a little bit drier versus having that morning dew on it. It's not a completely even obstacle for everybody, depending on which one you take. So I understand your idea for that. And I think that in the case of a spear throw, where it's just a matter of if it sticks until you pass a certain point, I'd totally go to the end. But that's just my opinion.
And I'm not just like this with Spartan. I think the exact same thing with Tough Mudder and electrical obstacles. I don't think they have a place in the competitive, race series, but they're not, I don't have a vote, so.
Yeah, imagine that if we actually had an opinion that mattered.
What about Tyler Veerman finishing 3rd in Utah?
Oh, yeah. So I looked at the splits during the race. Tyler was in 2nd place. He was like a second behind Ryan Atkins. He went out hard just like he did at Big Bear, but this time he didn't implode. And I mean, he's had some really, really strong finishes throughout the year. I honestly wasn't too surprised that he did that because he came into the race sitting in like 5th or 6th in the U.S. series to start. But Tyler was about 2.5 minutes off the win in Jacksonville when he finished 5th, 2.5 minutes off the win in Alabama when he got 6th. Then he got 5th place in Seattle. He had a rough race in Big Bear when he got 11th. But, I mean, 5.65 heading into it, that's consistent, taking down a lot of big names. He was beating Killian and Woods straight up heading into the race. And, I mean, he had an unbelievable downhill section. And he was the 5th best climber. He was about 1:20 slower than Johnny going up. And he was 1:15 slower going down. He was the 4th best descender. And then there was like a 6-minute section at the end when he, from the bucket carry to the finish line, which consisted of, it also had the spear throw, Herc hoist, slip wall, the dunk wall. And so it had a little bit of an obstacle gauntlet, not too bad, but it still had some. And he had the fastest split of the day. He was 10 seconds faster than anybody towards the end. So you can tell that once he had his eyes on the prize and he saw that Robert Killian ended up missing his spear and he had a true shot of getting 3rd place right there, he gave it everything that he had, and you could see it right at the finish line. He was on the verge of collapsing, just gave it his all, and just had a phenomenal season so far. And I last year he was right around that 10th place, but then he missed his spear at Tahoe. But I mean, watch out for the guy. He was one of the best climbers and one of the best ascenders, just like all the guys at the top. That kind of seems how it is these days. So he's going to have a great rest of the year for sure.
In 4th place was Ryan Kempson. We talked about him a little bit. I was looking at Ryan's race series. Ryan, like Tyler, those two guys would have really benefited from being able to drop their worst race this year.
Definitely. If you drop Ryan Kempson, too many Ryans, I got to specify. If you drop Ryan Kempson's 10th place in Seattle, where he slipped off like the monkey bars, which was a very shocking thing. I'm sure he would have finished better than 10th had that not happened, but that's racing. So, but he won in Jacksonville, 3rd in Alabama, 4th in Big Bear, 4th in Utah. that's a great season if you ask me. And I mean, he obviously showed up to all of them. Everybody had the same rules. You have to show up to them. None of them get dropped. And most people are going to end up having one inferior race unless you're Ryan Atkins, apparently. But same with Ryan Kent. Ryan Kent got 3, 5, 3, and 14 heading into this race. So if they had that drop your worst race, even Johnny Luna-Lima, he got 14th in Alabama. If you drop that, he would have had 7, 4, 1, 1. So that definitely the not being able to drop your worst race affected some people's standings for sure.
What do you think about that rule? You can't drop, all 5 races count. Do you think that's a good change, or do you prefer the way it used to be?
No, I think it's horrible. Like you roll an ankle like Ryan, or you hurt your hamstring like Ryan Woods did. Robert Killen, he had some military obligation. He couldn't race at the Seattle weekend. Say that you just get food poisoning or your job prevents you from leaving, or you have a wedding in the family or a friend and you're like, you know what, I actually value this outside racing experience more than just showing up on race day. Like it really forces you to make some difficult decisions. And I understand that people do that all the time with training, but I'm not a huge fan of the dropping your worst race at all.
In 5th place, you mentioned him, Robert Killian. Why was Robert Killian off the podium this race?
He missed a spear. That was very unconventional for him. He's basically, most of the people are Mr. Automatic, but I can't really think of many times that he's ever done burpees in any race. And before Carson race last weekend, I actually was practicing spear throw at his house. He has like 3 spears and a target and everything. And I mean, he's got it all set up at his house. He did a warm up before the Fort Carson race and he nailed it. He always goes to the USAA. They have the spear demo practice area, practices it before the race. And I mean, just right in the middle every single time. And so I was really surprised that he ended up losing it. But I think that he's still getting 5th place. He was in contention for 3rd overall with about 3 minutes to go in the race, and then he missed it. So I think that can just goes to show you that Robert Killian is pretty much back to the same old Killian that we came to expect. He was slow playing the season intentionally with his main focus on performing well towards the end of the year and not over racing. And considering he had the 2nd fastest uphill section from barbed wire to beater during this race, I think that just goes to show he was only 30 seconds slower than Johnny, and he was faster than everyone else, whether it was Cody Moat, Ryan Atkins, etc. on the climb. So that I think that Robert Killian is back for sure.
Jack, before we talk about the series as a whole for the men, are there any other men in the top 10 you want to talk about?
I actually just have a comment on, how I've mentioned some splits and how they performed during different stations.
Sure, yeah.
I have a really, really big issue with all the timing splits. Why do you only have one mat in a 30-minute zone? I think it would be really interesting to see how people do every 10 minutes or so, or who can go through the fastest on a certain obstacle gauntlet. But when you have one timing mat from 11 minutes in and then not another one until 41 minutes in, and that's the fastest guy, and you're telling me that there's 30 minutes of race that happens and you don't really know what's going on in between there, like where there are lead changes and stuff. I just think that racing company, whoever is in charge of the timing, just needs to do a better job in their map placement. Like Big Bear, first one, they had a timing mat at Monkey Bars 11 minutes into the race. The second timing mat was an hour and 16 minutes into the race. So an hour and 5 minutes went by on the men's side for the fastest guy in the whole race. It was at least an hour 5 for everyone else. And you have no idea what the heck happened in there, whether some people really dropped on a certain obstacle or whether they were just descending poorly. But I just think that they need to have more data out there just to kind of see how the race evolves, because you don't have coverage on every single person. You're only mainly showing the top 3 or some close battles depending on where the guys with the GoPros are. But I just think that they need more data. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I would love to know who we know who the fastest ascenders are and descenders. But I would love to know the fastest guys through the rig. Who's the fastest guy over the A-frame? Who's the fastest woman, across the monkey bars? I would love, timing mats at the start and finish of, the big obstacles. But
just a single, who's the single fastest sandbag carrier? Who's the fastest in the bucket? Or if they have 3 obstacles in a row, who's the best at doing the barbed wire and then running the next 200 meters. Like once you go out of a running motion into a certain, you're running for another minute. I think that would be great info to have, but it's just not available. And I know obviously I'm pretty data driven, but I feel like a lot of people would want to see that info instead of just being like, oh, here's checkpoint A, here's checkpoint B. An hour later, I guess stuff happened and now Johnny's in the lead. Like I just don't like how there's just so much missing info out there.
I know if we were to ask Spartan, they'd probably say, oh, it's more expensive. And I'm sure it is more expensive, but there's no labor involved. It's just, buying the mats and setting them up at the beginning and tearing them down at the end.
Exactly.
And then a guy...
And just having a little bit of... I'm sure that they have Wi-Fi or satellite coverage because they're not going to have just a giant extension cord going up a mountain for 2,000 feet. Like, they're not going to do that. But the data is available. Like, they can do it. I know friends who work for timing mat companies, and if you run like a marathon, they usually have... A lot of them, or the bigger ones at least, they have data at the 5K checkpoint, 10K checkpoint, like very fixed intervals. And I feel like there are certain things that would be very, very like valuable to know, and they're just missing it. So it's just kind of frustrating on my end because if you just look at the data, it's like, all right, here's how they started, here's how they finished. Johnny was a really good descender and a really good climber, but that's all you really know. You don't really know where they made up ground because not everyone's on Strava. Not everyone has a Garmin tracking their GPS. Maybe they're like Ryan Kempson. He said that his watch turned off on him on the downhill. So you don't really know what his fastest speed was or anything like that, or where he might have made a move. But all that you know is at some point in the last half an hour of the race, he made up 9 positions. So I would just love to know where that happened, that kind of stuff. But you don't always see it on camera.
So before we talk about the men's series as a whole, let's just to recap the Utah men's results. In first place, Johnny Luna-Lima. In second, Ryan Atkins. In third, Tyler Veerman. In fourth, Ryan Kempson. In fifth, Robert Killian. In sixth, Cody Moat. In seventh, Ryan Kent. In eighth, Ian Hosick. In ninth, Ryan Woods. And in 10th, Sean Stevens-Whale.
Yep. And Sean actually just finished top 10 at the Red Bull 400 World Championship in Whistler, British Columbia, the weekend before. So everyone, I'm sure a lot of people have heard that he's a really good stair climber. So clearly top 10 in the world in that event. I ran one of them earlier this year in Utah, and those things are no joke. He was ahead of Matt Novakovic in that race also. So clearly great climber, and it translated well in Utah.
So for the series as a whole, the top 5 men... In first place was Ryan Atkins. In second was Johnny Luna-Lima. In third was Ryan Kempson. In fourth is Ryan Kent. And in fifth is Tyler Veerman. What do you think about those results?
Johnny, because of that win, he ended up getting there's a 36-point gap between first and second, and then 24 going down. He ended up beating Ryan Kempson by 30 points. So getting that difference between first and second was what drove him to the win. Atkins, or I guess second place in the standings. Head to head, he won over Kempson.
So Atkins in first. No surprise there.
No, like we said, he needed to get like 47th or worse not to win.
And Johnny Luna-Lima in second. What do you think? How do you think Johnny Luna-Lima will do at the North American Championships?
Why wouldn't he do well if he stays healthy at this point? It's a beast course. He's already won a really challenging beast course with some difficult descents and some really good climbs. And I mean, I think he's just going to keep growing on this.
He's won 2 races in a row, so that's going to boost your confidence.
Definitely. And I mean, just right there saying that he had the fastest uphill and the fastest downhill. I mean, that's a tough combo to beat. Let's be real.
Third.
And actually, you mentioned that there was someone, or any more thoughts on the top 10. I was kind of surprised Cody Moat got 6th. Did you?
He did.
He was about
surprised he finished that low or that high.
That poorly by his standards. I know he's 40, but I just would have expected him hometown, or not hometown. It was still a few hours away realistically, but in Utah, he's at elevation, and I mean, just usually a really, really consistent racer. But this is only the 4th or 3rd time in his career he has finished outside of the top 5.
Do you think that is more due to him being on a decline, or is it the other guys on the rise, the Ryan Atkins, the Tyler Veermans, and the Johnny Luna-Limas that weren't there a couple years ago?
I think if you had to write just a quick summary on what the heck happened in 2019, this is the year that the rest of the race or the chase pack caught the lead pack. Just Johnny Luna-Lima, Tyler Veerman, Ryan Kempson, Ian Hosick is up there. VJ made a name for himself. Those guys finally took over the Ryan Woodses, Robert Killian. Ryan Atkins has remained super consistent, obviously, but you've seen slip-ups from the previously super dominant guys, even Cody Moke getting the sixth this race. He doesn't race all the time, but that never would have happened before. And if you said at the beginning of the year that a race in Utah, Cody Mote would lose to Johnny Luna-Lima, Tyler Veerman, and Ryan Kempson, I don't think you'd have too many people placing that bet. But it happened, and same deal with just a lot of the up-and-coming guys have taken down Ryan Woods and some of those other big names, and I'm really, really a huge fan of how tight the competition is these days, and I think it's great for the sport.
Speaking of Utah racers, I did not see Hobie Call out there.
Actually, I was going to talk about Mr. Call, but not Hobie. Actually, his son, Hawk. Hawk ended up winning the age group race by like 7 or 8 minutes. If he ended up racing in the elite division instead of age group, he would have finished 14th, right there with Mark Batres. That's pretty awesome, honestly. And he's 20 years old. I'm sure his dad's taught him a few things. But, I mean, if he decides to take this seriously, watch out for him. Not too many people make that transition from age group into elite, and I don't know what his rationale was on why he decided to race age group instead of that, or instead of elite. But I mean, if you took his equivalent performance, he would have been just in the low teens. So that's a really, really promising sign for him if he decides to race.
It'll be interesting to see the kind of the first second generation elite racer.
Yeah, maybe it'll turn out to be like Ken Griffey Jr. and his dad Homer in the same race. Maybe they'll get podium at the same race.
Let's go back to the series points. We talked about Atkins in first, Johnny Luna-Lima in second, Ryan Kempson in third. In fourth is Ryan Kent. Ryan did pretty well for not winning any of the races.
Yeah, Ryan got 2 third places though, so that really helped his points. Where he got it in Jacksonville and Seattle. Despite doing burpees there. And he had a really, really tight finish in Alabama. He was less than 2 minutes off the win, but he finished fifth that race. So he had a very solid season so far, and then got 7th in Utah. His bad race was in Big Bear. Like I mentioned, he got 14th, which is what Johnny Luna-Lima got in Alabama. So most of the top guys had one throwaway race at some point during the season instead of being their normal top 5 or so. But he had a very, very strong season overall.
And in fifth place, Tyler Veerman.
Yep, we gave him a shout out already, and he's walking away with $3,700 total this year from his individual races and getting 5th place in the series.
You know what? You want to talk about the prize winnings for the year so far for like Atkins, all the guys, the top 5?
Yeah, I would love to have Ryan Atkins' check deposited in my bank account. He's walking away with $17,000 on the year. If he won $8,000 from just winning the series, which is awesome. And Johnny took home $4,000 for getting second. Third, Ryan Kempson got $2,500, and then Ryan Kent and Tyler Veerman each walked away with $1,000. So pretty awesome.
Any last thoughts on the men before we talk about the women?
I think we did a pretty thorough discussion on it, and I mean it's so unpredictable. I guess one thing that I'll mention is the prediction contest that I had.
Oh, how did that go?
Do you want to know how you did?
Absolutely.
Are you sure? So
I was pretty confident in my picks about a week ago.
Yeah. So you ended up getting tied for 81st.
Out of how many thousand?
Well, there were 101 different entries this week, and you got 9 points. Only, let's see how many people. Only 12 people had 8 or fewer points. So you did really, really well for yourself right there.
Outstanding.
Yeah, absolutely. Out of the 10 people in any order, you guessed 5 of them correctly out of 10, which was tied for the second worst in the entire contest. So good job on you.
You know what killed me? Johnny Luna-Lima won the race. I don't think I even had him in my top 5. And then everybody else picked Lindsay and Nicole 1 and 2, I'm sure, in some order. And I picked Rhea in second. Do you want to know what kills me? I have absolutely bombed the women so far, or bombed the men so far, and I have the second highest total based on women. Like I've picked 19 out of the 25
correct, like they're going to show up in the top 10. Only 2 people have 20. And so I've basically nailed the women in general. The men, I am horrible at picking it. And I've made sure that I let that be known before the race last week in Utah. I was like, I have zero confidence in what I'm picking right now because it could go anywhere. And that's exactly what happened. I only got 2 of the men total in the top 5. I thought that Woods would end up there. I didn't put Johnny because I was nervous about his ankle, and then he ends up winning it. And Kempson, I thought that he was going to narrowly miss the top 5, just losing the Woods. Turns out he got 4th. So, I mean, it's a crapshoot at this point. But in total, so the maximum points that you could have got was 30, where you get 5 for first, 4 for second, getting them in the correct order. 30 would be the max. Only 9 people got more than 15 points.
Wow.
Which is like doing half perfect. So that just goes to show you how all over the place. It's not just you. It's not just me. No one's guessing it well. So it's just this whole season has just been a total crapshoot. Josh Chase, he tied with me with 13 points this week. Wasn't the best showing for any podcaster, to be real. So, but overall, it can go anywhere. Even Steve Hammond, he ended up voting and he only got 13 points. He designed the course. He should know who's going to do well, but clearly didn't go the way that he predicted either. So it's really fun to see kind of how people think things will go, and then the reality sets in the following day, and no one ended up doing well.
So let's talk about those women's results. The top 10 women, the Utah race, were in first, Lindsay Webster. In second, Nicole Mericle. In third, Faye Stenning. In fourth, Rose Wetzel. In fifth, Leanne Wasteney. In sixth, Rhea Coble. In seventh, Annie Dubé. Tell me here, Jack. Dubé.
Believe.
In eighth, Alexandra Walker. In ninth, Jamie Brusa. And in 10th, Timmy Braun. Lindsay and Nicole, what do you think?
Shocked, absolutely shocked that the 2 of those ended up being the top 2. No, actually, literally 100% of people picked them in the top 3 each. So no one who voted in the contest was surprised at all that those were the 2 who ended up finishing towards the top. So
it seems like it's almost every race that Nicole starts out strong, kind of at the very, like she goes out like a rabbit at the start line.
Actually, Lindsay had an 18-second lead at the first checkpoint, 12 and a half minutes into the race over Nicole.
Well, watching just from the footage, it looked like Nicole took off faster.
Oh,
at least
yeah.
The start.
Yeah, you're talking like the first 100 meters just to make sure she doesn't. Yeah, okay.
And then Lindsay, kind of takes her time, and then I didn't realize that seems early. Actually, no, watching the race, yeah, she did pass her earlier than usual, but then she took some gap, and it didn't seem there was a lot of drama, at least for first place. Nicole had some people coming up on her at the end when she was at the spear, but she nailed her spear and had no problem securing second.
Yep, exactly. And Lindsay ended up having, how I went over the uphill splits after the barbed wire until beater right at the top?
Sure.
Lindsay ended up running that 2 minutes and 9 seconds faster than any other female racer in the entire race. And Nicole actually had a better uphill section than Rhea, which is kind of surprising. A lot of people I would have assumed would have picked Rhea to be the top climber, but she was over 2.5 minutes slower than Lindsay. So pretty dominating performance. I know that after the race, they asked Lindsay why she took it out harder, because normally she kind of sits back and then cruises and puts on the gas later in the race. But she said that she wanted to build up enough of a lead just in case she missed her spear, which is what ended up happening. Did you see the video? What happened with her on that spear?
So she missed her spear. She's disappointed. She starts to run over to the burpee pit. And as she gets, 5 feet from the pit, she tripped over the rope of one of the men that was at one of the elite men that she'd caught up with, and she hit the ground hard.
It was a total faceplant. That was a very hard fall for sure. And you could see a lot of agony on her face right there. But that was a really tough fall for her. But man, she got up, knocked him out, and then. Yep.
Yeah, she kind of shook it off almost immediately and was like, I got to do my burpees and I got to get out of here.
3 seconds just was like, crap, that happened. Well, I'm going to do my burpees, whatever.
Yeah, that was remarkable.
Yeah, definitely. So Lindsay, no surprise, was the best female descender during the race. Add in the burpees, she ended up doing that in 31:27. Faye was the second best descender in 33:25. So even with burpees, Lindsay ended up finishing descending just about 2 minutes faster than the second best. So it would have been about 3.5 to 4 minutes faster than the entire field had that not happened. If you look at Lindsay's downhill, she actually would have had the 15th best on the men's side, and that includes burpees. If you throw out those burpees, she probably would have been about the 10th or so fastest descender, right there with Cody Mote and Ryan Woods. That's how dominant she was in the descent.
With Nicole Mericle in second, I think I've been as guilty of this as anybody, maybe even worse. I think it's time to retire the kind of the trope that Nicole is the fastest woman on a flat course. And maybe she is, but she's not just a flat course runner.
Yeah, I feel like her stereotypes are pretty much in line with Ryan Kempson. She's not just a one-trick pony. Yeah, I think that everyone assumes Kempson, just like you said, with Nicole, is just a short course racer. Nicole, obviously, world champion at OCR Worlds in the 3K and pretty much unbeatable there. But she's legit at even the longer races. She's had first place, second this year in 4 supers and 1 beast. That does not mean you're a good short course racer only. Like, she can bring it at every distance. So she had the 3rd fastest descent and the 2nd fastest uphill. So didn't really seem like too flat of a course, if you ask me. And she actually had the fastest gauntlet at the end from the bucket to the finish, including the burpees and the Herc hoist and the slip wall at the end. She was 22 seconds faster than Faye. So doesn't matter where she was on the course. She was having one of the top 2 or 3 splits in the entire race.
You know, Nicole is clearly on the ascendancy, right? She's heading to the top. But Lindsay has shown no signs of slowing down or letting up or making any room for Nicole. So it'll be fun to watch the two of them, over the next few years fight it out.
Can you see anyone like dethroning Lindsay? Nicole's not new. She's been around for a while, and I just feel like Lindsay is so dominant at this point. It's just going to take a while for somebody to even get on her level.
You don't think Nicole has a shot?
I think in certain races she might, but realistic, if it's a super flat course like the earlier part of the season, absolutely she can take down Lindsay's not unbeatable. She actually got 3rd in the sprint, which is really surprising. She lost to Leigh Wasteney and Faye Stenning on Sunday in the sprint, so that was pretty surprising performance. I didn't think that it should get 3rd in any race this year, never mind on a Sunday sprint. But Lindsay, I feel like she knows when to bring it, and it is almost impossible to take down when she knows championship season's around the corner. Nicole
beat her at the 3K last year.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I think that she can take her down in some of the shorter courses and when they're flatter. But Lindsay is Lindsay for a reason, and it's really difficult for anybody to match her.
This won't happen just because of stuff that's changed. But I would love to see the two of them at like an 8-hour or a 12-hour race.
I'd have my money on Lindsay probably just because she's actually run those races before and won them. But that's just my opinion. And so we're talking about Lindsay and Nicole. I actually did a comparison of how close the men's field is versus the women's, because I'm sure you've noticed, like, men's races in Jacksonville, the top 10 was separated by 4 minutes 36 seconds. 1 and 2 in Jacksonville was 6:46. So like the spread is unreal. If you look at the average gap between first and second, it is 2.89 times closer on the men's side than it is on the women's side. And it's basically consistent. It's between 2.3 and 2.9 for all the top 10 positions, basically down to 20th place. It's at least 2 times closer on the men's side relative to the winner for each place than it is on the women's for all these 5 biggest races of the year so far. So I feel like it's the Lindsay and Nicole show and then everyone else versus the men's side where it's like anything can happen and you're having a lot of tight battles.
So what does that mean? Does that mean Lindsay and Nicole are just so much better than the women's field, or does that mean that all of the men have kind of caught up with Ryan Atkins?
I would say it's a combination of the two. I think that that Lindsay and Nicole are basically the Ryan Atkins and Robert Killian equivalents. Like no matter even 5 years from now when the sport develops even more, I think that they'll remain as super consistent. But I feel like the chase pack, what's happened this year with Ryan Kempson, Johnny Luna-Lima, Tyler Veerman, those guys, that has not happened on the women's side, and it's clear based on the giant gaps that are still happening in these races between the top and the bottom. But this is same exact thing that's happening on the women's side, where you have a few dominant people. That was happening in the men's races up until a couple of years ago, where you'd have Hobie or Cody or Robert Killian just run away with stuff for a while. But now the gap is closed, and one small slip up and you drop from second to 10th. One small slip up, like Lindsay, it doesn't matter. She's still going to get first or second almost every race. And it might affect a few of the other racers, but there's a clear A group and a B group on the women's side.
So you mentioned that chase pack. Lindsay and Nicole had first and second. There was a group of 4 women that were fighting for third place all the way near the end at the spear throw. Tell me about those 4 women.
So Leanne Wasteney should have got third place this race had she run a clear race. Her performance, she basically ran a third place quality race. She ended up missing her spear at the end, and during that time, Rose Wetzel had and Faye Stenning. So basically, just to backtrack, it was Leanne, Faye, and Rhea. The 3 of them basically separated by 10 seconds for a good portion of the downhill. Would you say?
Sure. Yeah.
So the 3 of them were battling, and they reached the spear. They were all at the spear station right around the same time. And Faye was the only one that hit it out of Rhea and Leanne. Leanne basically had it stuck in, and then it just fell out at the end. It was pretty unfortunate for her.
That's who I was thinking about talking. If Leanne had made that at the last spearman instead of at the second spearman, I think she would have been able to get out of there in time.
Yeah, I think that they're pretty consistent. I actually prefer the new padding that they have this year versus the hay, because it's just more consistent. But that example right there with hers just falling out, that was a tough loss for her right there. But anyway, so Leanne and Rhea are doing burpees. At that point, Leanne is in 4th and Rhea is in 5th. But then Rose Wetzel comes storming out of nowhere on the downhill. She gets there and it takes a long time to warm up. Rose is really notorious for having a long warm up session in terms just to make sure that she's got her arm angle right and just holding it. She very, very precise in her spear throw preparation, and she ended up hitting it. She got to the Hercois basically same time as Leanne and ended up hoisting it a couple seconds quicker. It was basically an all-out sprint for her to get to the dunk wall and then go under there and run up the slip wall. And she ended up edging Leanne by about 7 seconds to finish 4th. So really, really good finish by Rose. I think if it's one-on-one her versus most people, especially Leanne or Rhea coming out of burpees, that's going to be almost impossible for someone to beat a fresh Rose just based on her track background and her desire to win at that point in the race. So really strong showing by Rose. If you actually look at the finishing section, Nicole had the fastest time during that bucket carry to finish, but Rose, she had top 5 fastest split during that section as well, but she had a really good closing there.
She finished at 3rd in Jacksonville, the first race of the season. Rose did. And we were all, wow, good to see Rose again, wondering if that was for real, but she's had a good year. She has, and I feel like she's benefited a little bit from people missing their spears, because you remember in Jacksonville, a couple people ended up missing their spear. It was Tia Reagan and a few others, and she ended up obviously she brought it that day. And part of racing is don't mess up and don't do burpees, and that's exactly what she's done all season. And as a result of it, she's had 3rd place there. She got 4th place in this race, and she just had a really solid season as a whole. We kind of skipped over Faye Stenning finishing in 3rd. What'd you think of that? I think it's a really, really good recovery for her. If you look at Faye's trajectory on the season, 10th in Jacksonville, 8th in Alabama, 5th in Seattle, and 5th in Big Bear, now 3rd in Utah. That's how you want your season to go. You don't want to go 1, 3, 5, 7. You want to be descending every single time, closer to 1. So I think that she's on a really, really good track for West Virginia and Tahoe. I don't think that she can take down Lindsay. I know that a couple of years ago she was right there, but I feel like Lindsay at this point is just on another level, and same as Nicole at this point. So if the two of them stay healthy, a realistic best expectation with Zuzana pregnant and not racing this year at Tahoe would probably be 3rd place for Faye. But
I still think Leanne, if Leanne had not done burpees, Leanne would have literally every single race this year, head to head, except for Seattle, would have beaten Faye. So I think that Leanne is a legitimate top 5 threat at Tahoe as well.
Do you think, is it fair to say that most of the women are fighting for third place?
How could if anybody's been watching the sport this entire season, it's just been Lindsay and Nicole, and then Rhea on a couple of mountain courses where she can really excel. But I think that Lindsay and Nicole just don't really have too many weaknesses at this point. Rhea would probably be the toughest contender for them, but I don't think that anybody's not named Lindsay or Nicole has a chance of winning the world championship. And I think that Lindsay by far has the best odds on that. But I think that Rhea might be able to get second at Tahoe, depending on like Miriam Guillaume-Boisset, how she does, or Nicole. But I think that most of the rest of the field would be able to walk away happy with third place, because that's just realistically what most likely the best scenario would be.
We talked about Faye in third, Rose in fourth, Leanne Wasteney in fifth. In sixth place was my podium pick, Rhea Coble.
How'd that work out?
I need to talk to her. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, you were very confident in it. I just remember us having a very polite agreement or disagreement.
You were very unconfident in my choice, and it turns out you were right.
Yeah, so I think Rhea is a tremendous racer. I was just kind of putting together the pieces where running a 30-plus mile trail race the weekend before, and then some steep descents at the end. That was just kind of what made me nervous on expecting her to get a top 3, like you said, or a top 5. So obviously I want to see her do well, but that was just my rationale behind it.
Any more thoughts on the top 5 or top 10 women before we talk about the women's series as a whole?
Yeah, let's go into the. Well, I was kind of surprised Alyssa Hawley got 12th. I don't think that I really saw that coming, and as a result of that, she actually dropped 2 places in the overall points series. So that was kind of if she got 10th, she would have been tied with 1,000 points with Faye, and then Faye would have lost the head-to-head competition. I believe that's how they're doing it, like most head-to-head wins in the 5 races. And Alyssa would have been 5th. Granted, Rose had a great race, but I was just surprised that Alyssa didn't have a good performance in this race.
After the start line, I don't think I saw her the entire race.
No, she was kind of a non-factor in this race, but that was kind of Ryan Woods on the men's side. He just said he didn't have his climbing legs, and I mean, people have bad races here and there, so you can't really, it's not the end of the world. It's obviously disappointing to her, I'm sure, but she's always done really well during championship season, had a 3rd place at Tahoe a couple of years ago. So I think that she'll bounce back nicely, kind of like Ryan Kent seems to do after a rough race. So I would expect Alyssa to have a good last 2 major races this year.
So for the overall series, the Women's US Championship Series, in first place, Lindsay Webster. In second place, Nicole Mericle. In third place, Rhea Coble. In fourth place, Rose Wetzel. And in fifth, Faye Stenning.
Yes, and Lindsay ended up taking home $20,000 over the course of the season for these races. Never mind just getting third on the Sunday sprint. So just U.S. Series only, 12,000 individual races and 8,000 for the series title. So that was a very lucrative past weekend for her to lock up the series win.
Lindsay and Ryan, her husband, both do this full time. Nicole Mericle has just recently got into this full-time training and racing, and she finished second this year.
Yep. I mean, they've been the 2 best female races for a long time, and you can see that with the point gap. I mean, they're almost 300 points. Nicole's almost 300 points above Rhea for between second and third, so there's a clear gap between the top 2 women this whole year.
In third place, Rhea Coble. Any surprise there?
I think that's right around where I expected her, just based on when they released the season schedule at the beginning of the year. Jacksonville and Alabama looked like they were going to be tough races for her, and she got 7th and 6th there, respectively. And then Seattle, she said that that's one of her favorite venues, and Big Bear, that she's a great climber, so she gets 3rd and 2nd there, and I expected her to do right around how she performed in Utah. So very consistent. Top 7 in all 5 races with 2 podiums. So I think that earned her the third place title on the year.
In fourth place in a comeback, Rose Wetzel.
she's been very consistent, just like I mentioned before, 3rd, 10th, 7th, 6th, and 4th. So very, very strong showing for her throughout the year. And I think that she just doesn't end up doing burpees, and that's definitely what it takes. She's clearly got the running there, and she can capitalize when other people make mistakes, and she obviously has the talent to do really well, so that's why she finished 4th in the U.S. Series, and she's definitely back.
You know, Rose is no Lindsay Webster, she'll tell you that, but I think it's good for the sport to have someone like Rose that is a known face, a known, and she's a likable person. She's always got a smile. And I think it's good for the sport to have Rose do well.
Well, is she the known face? Because, I mean, for the past 3-4 years, it's been the Fab Five on the women's side. Lindsay, Nicole, Rhea, Alyssa, and Faye. Like, those have been the known faces. But I guess if you're saying, like, someone sort of from the early years reemerging, yeah, I think that's a great thing for the sport to have. Because it doesn't really exist on the men's side. You have Cody Moat occasionally popping up, but Hobie's gone, Hunter's gone, Ryan Atkins, he's been around since 2014. He got his 2nd place at Killington, but that's not that new. Ryan Kent, he's had some older races right around that same time period, but for the most part, it's newer faces who've made the biggest difference on the men's side this year. But it definitely is good having someone who's had some length in the sport like Rose, still being one of the best in the sport.
And in 5th place, Faye Stenning. How do you think Faye did this year?
As I mentioned, her trajectory is going in the right direction. Started with 10th and then has improved every single race and finishing 3rd in Utah. That's a good sign for the rest of the year.
So this Utah is kind of the end of the first of there's really 3 big series, U.S. races. There's the U.S. Championship Series, which is 5 races. There's West Virginia, which is the North American Championship. And there's Tahoe, which is the World Championship. And so with the U.S. Championship Series done, the next 2 races everyone's looking forward to is West Virginia and Tahoe. What do you think about the men for West Virginia?
Always got to put Atkins in the top 2 or 3 just because he's Mr. Consistent. I think you'd agree with that as well. It's
Absolutely.
Really difficult. Yeah, he's Mr. Automatic. And even if he doesn't win, you don't feel bad for putting him there because you know that he's always going to be right there. I would also say Johnny Luna-Lima, just based on his season as a whole, definitely a threat. I think Robert Killian is coming into form just as he said he'd be doing at this point in the year. And Ryan Kempson has proved that he's legit. So I think that those guys would probably be the top 4 best picks. But there are a few other guys who aren't just U.S. racers who I would keep an eye on. Mikhail Garillo, I hope that I'm pronouncing that correctly. I've heard him say it before, but I think I butchered that. But he is a really, really talented racer in Canada. And he ended up getting like 5th and 6th. Him and Jesse Bruce, they came down from Canada last year and did really well at West Virginia. So I could see those 2 as probably the top non-Ryan Atkins Canadians coming down. And you also have to look at Angel Quintero because he's Mr. Consistent in major races. He just got 6th in Big Bear, and he's had several top 10s at World Championship before. And I think that he was top 10 at West Virginia last year as well. So it won't just be it'll be most of the faces you've seen throughout the season at the U.S. National Series, whether they've shown up in 1 race or 2 races, and even like a VJ who's had a tremendous season, had a rough showing in Utah. I think that it'll be ready in Big Bear, but I think that a lot of the standard U.S. guys will be there, but watch out for those non-U.S. North American racers that I just mentioned right there on the men's side.
Yeah, I think if VJ popped up onto the podium, it'd be a surprise, but not really a surprise. Like, we would all have, oh, yeah, of course, VJ would make it.
Yeah, he had a really rough race in terms of just how he kind of like not degraded, but at the beginning, like 11 minutes in, VJ was in 5th place, and then he dropped to 6th place later, and they're about halfway through it, and then 7th about with maybe 10, 15 minutes left in the race, it looks like, and then he dropped to 11th towards the end. So I'm going to assume that he missed some obstacle towards the end because he dropped 4 places in the final 6 minutes of the race. So that's not something you'd expect from VJ.
And then what about Tahoe for the men?
Oh, it's so early, but like I said, I would say if I had to pick at this moment, I would go John Albin, Johnny Luna-Lima, and Ryan Atkins as my 3 most likely to finish in the top 5.
And then on the women's side, who do you think we should watch for the women in West Virginia?
I would love to see Rebecca Hammond make a comeback. Just her story last year was just amazing to see. And if you looked at her performances earlier in the year, she got 4th in Jacksonville and 3rd in Alabama, and she's been injured in Seattle and Big Bear. So it's unfortunate we didn't get to see how she would do the rest of the season. But based on her amazing performance and her run at the second half of last season, if she can remain healthy, and she won't be that who is this type person anymore in West Virginia, everyone will know that she belongs in second place if that's where she ended up being at some point during the race. But I would love to see her mix it up with the top racers. But I would still bet that Lindsay and Nicole will be the top 2. And it's a tight battle. I would probably give it between Leanne and Faye, most likely, for the 3rd place position, just because it's a beast. Rose has had a great season, but I think that super in sprints, I'd absolutely put her in that top 5 watch right there. And she, for all we know at this point, she very well could end up being top 5. But if I'm looking at top 3, I would probably narrow it down to Lindsay, Nicole, and then either Faye, Leanne, or Rebecca if she's healthy.
And then what do you think about the women in Tahoe? What international women should we keep an eye on?
Myriam Guillaud-Boisset, she is legit. I definitely would put her as a top 3 pick right now. If I had to, I'd probably put Lindsay, Nicole, and Myriam as my top 3. No one's really paying attention to her from the U.S., but she has basically won every single thing that she's done, and she's beating the women in Europe by bigger margins than John Albin is beating the men. So that can just tell you something about her. She's got ridiculous range. She did like 300 burpees at Tahoe a couple years ago and still finished 8th. So if she gets her burpees down, she's unbelievable. I would argue, a better climber than Rhea, which is kind of amazing. She's not as good of a descender as Lindsay or Nicole or some of the other top women, but without a doubt, Myriam should be on your podium watch list.
Well, Jack, any last thoughts on Utah or the Spartan US Championship Series?
So if we look at the overall point series, I just kind of wanted to jump to that.
Sure. So
would you say it became more of a or like a participation contest, like who showed up?
For the maybe the like 5th to 8th place, 5th to 12th place, yeah, maybe. But for the top, Lindsay and Nicole, no. For Ryan and Johnny Luna-Lima, no. But for that kind of next level, not even like the 1B level, but like the 2A level, I would say, then I could see that. Yeah. What do you think?
Okay, my thought is that Robert Killian, he gets 6th, 4th, misses Seattle, 8th in Big Bear, and then 5th in Utah. He finished 13th in the series. Like, how can you justify that he is the 13th best racer of the year? And Ryan Woods didn't have he ended up dropping out of Seattle. He got bumped down. He realistically should have got 2nd place at Jacksonville, but he dropped down to 12th. So he had 12, 7, blank because he didn't race, or he didn't finish in Seattle.
Ryan Woods is tough to use as an example because he got done wrong in that first race.
Yeah. And then 3rd and 9th. So, like, how is he the 12th best racer in the points series? Like, that just doesn't make sense to me that he's had such great performances. Meanwhile, nothing against, like, I think Aaron Newell's had a great season, but he's had 11, 22, 7, 7, like, heading into Utah is, like, I just don't understand how, like, he ended up finishing 7th in the overall series despite having worse individual performances in almost all those races than the guys who just happened to miss one race due to some injury or life getting in the way. So I think that they really need to rethink how they're going to disperse the points next year. And there were several other people who had lots of teen finishes, but just simply by showing up to a lot of these races, they clinched a top 10, top 15 ranking and beat some guys who definitely performed better than them individually, but just weren't at enough of the races.
I'm not saying you're wrong, because I don't think you are, but I think everyone knew the rules going in. Now, what'll happen is we'll go to West Virginia, we'll go to Tahoe, and the guy, Ryan Woods and Robert Killian will show there that they're not the 13th best in the world. They're the country. They'll finish in the top 5. They'll finish in the top 7 and show everyone, how good they are. So I don't think anyone's going to look at these results and be like, "Oh man, Ryan Woods has really gone downhill since last year." But I guess if someone just looked at the numbers, that's what they would think. You're right.
Yeah, and you just mentioned like the rules and Ryan Woods getting screwed at Jacksonville. There was one other thing that I saw during the broadcast. Did you see Johnny Luna-Lima, he touched the side of Pipeler, and people were like, "Oh, he cheated."
I did see that. Yeah.
If you seriously think that he is cheating by touching the side of if you think Pipeler is the obstacle that is going to determine whether Johnny Luna-Lima wins that race, you're out of your mind. There is a big difference between cheating and you're just going through an obstacle. You happen to touch it. Like, he is not cutting switchbacks. He's not intentionally putting his feet on the ground during the multi-rig because he lost his grip, or emptying out dirt from the bucket or anything. It's an incidental contact. I think Ryan Woods got screwed earlier in the year, and had he had a second place showing in Jacksonville instead of that 12th that he got bumped to, the whole season would have been completely different for him. And I don't know if he lost motivation after that, or he just genuinely had a rough season as a whole. But I feel like all these like little infractions, they get so blown out of proportion, and it's just I just think it's really like John Penland. Do you think that he should have got penalized for going over that fire? Was he 5 minutes slower or 10 minutes slower that race because he took an edge or the inside curve on a poorly designed finish area that went around a bend? I don't think so. And like, there's just so many of these stupid little infractions that people who watch all the races on like the live or the tape delayed footage, they're calling out like, "Oh, Johnny only did 4.5 burpees or something, or he touched the side of this pipe." I just think it's garbage how some of these rules are getting, or how so many like rule interpretations there are these days, and why people want to penalize people retroactively.
I could do an entire episode over what you just talked about right now. One, I think Ryan Woods' situation in Jacksonville is almost directly comparable to what happened with Johnny Luna-Lima. Now, I don't think Johnny Luna-Lima should be penalized, and I don't think Ryan Woods should be penalized either. But I don't think just because Ryan Woods got penalized that you have to penalize Johnny Luna-Lima. I think you get it right. You leave Johnny Luna-Lima alone. He touched it. Okay, whatever. He wasn't taking an edge. He wasn't cheating. That was ridiculous. And for Ryan Woods, he was done wrong back then. And you're right. Like, that was the first race of the season. It was an exciting finish, and then it's like a punch to the gut, I'm sure, when they're like, "Oh, no." In fact, you mentioned how he got 12th. Initially, they told him he was disqualified, like 0 points for the entire thing. And it was a day or two later they came back and said, no, we'll give you 12th place, or however many minutes penalized, but she ended up in 12th place. The other thing is, no one that is sitting on their couch watching on their laptop should have any vote in any refereeing decision. That is ridiculous. That I don't care how much they tweet or how much you get on Facebook and complain about what you saw on the feed. You're not there on the course. You're not a referee or a course marshal. You don't have a vote. So great,
especially tape delayed.
Yeah. So that I think that was a factor with Ryan Woods also at the very beginning of the season, is a bunch of people, because I want to say that was a live race, wasn't it? They didn't do the tape delay until the second or third race of the season.
They had the reception issues, I want to say, in Alabama, so that's why they decided to do the tape delay. And of course, there's that conspiracy theory that they decided to do tape delay because they wanted to avoid any live controversy like what happened with Trustgate earlier. But I think that realistically they did it because they wanted to have a better polished product and had the deal with ESPN to show the races and had a full day to edit it afterwards, and it came out way better. That's just how I interpret it happening. But yeah, that big delay or that big controversy was in the first race.
So I think they did it right with Johnny Luna-Lima with this last race. Nothing happened. Maybe I don't know what the letter of the law is, but Johnny Luna-Lima did not violate the spirit of it. No one was not trying to take an edge.
I bet if you go through like the race pictures and you look, I would be very curious how many other elite racers, whether or not they're in the top 10 or the top 50, like how many of them incidentally touched it. Or like how many minor infractions happened throughout the race. They just happened to see that because he's in the lead. That was not the reason why. Like I said, he had the fastest climb. He had the fastest ascent. He didn't go through pipe layer 40 seconds faster than anybody else. That's not why he ended up winning by this huge distance. Like that was a completely inconsequential maneuver right there. And I just really wish that they would just leave it to racing and let the racers decide it out on the course. Like I have a feeling Ryan Atkins is not like, "Oh yeah, I think that Johnny should be DQ'd. Like that's the only reason that he beat me." No chance he's thinking that. And I'm sure Ryan Kempson is thinking the same thing. And basically everybody who lost to Johnny, no one's thinking that something that minor is the reason why Johnny ended up winning. So, or that he should realistically be penalized for that. And if he dumps stuff out of a bucket, then it's a completely different story. But this is just a minor thing.
And we're talking about this like it's a big deal. I wouldn't have even noticed this if I hadn't heard about it before I watched the race. So like it was kind of a thing on Twitter or on Instagram, and I was like, okay. So I watched I had to rewind it to see it the second. I didn't see it the first time. So it's not even a thing. And I think, when they write the rules, they were written either for something like the trust, they were written a long time ago, and then people bring up the rules that were written a long time ago, and then they changed the rules on woods immediately after so that this wouldn't happen again. Or something like the pipe layer, which is a brand new obstacle this year. They wrote the rules before they really had run through the obstacle for races, and the rules are either not. I don't want to say they're written poorly, but I think they should be clarified or made. No one was cheating. No one was trying. You're right. There is absolutely cheating that happens. People, skip obstacles, or they dump rocks, or they go off course. That happens every single race. But no one. This is not what anyone did. And none of the top elites did.
And do you think anybody's stupid enough if they have the cameras on them to try to get away with something?
Seriously, there's drones. There's those rabbit runner guys that
there's pictures on it. There's the people who want to find people who cheat. Like that some people just get some sick thrill out of it where they're like, oh yeah, I totally called this person and busted them. And like, there's no way that Ryan Woods in Jacksonville, for instance, was like, man, all these cameras here, I'm totally going to grab this trust just to try to get away with it. And Johnny definitely wasn't thinking like, oh yeah, I read the rules because pipe layer is something that I'm really, really concerned about. And I'm going to make sure that I touch the side just so I can get an extra millisecond faster on this obstacle. That is just ridiculous that anything like that would happen.
It's a hot topic in the Spartan communities over, run your own race versus, we want to be a sport, so we need to police each other kind of thing. I tend to fall on the side of, if someone is actively, I've seen it happen at Toughest Mudder, different races I've done, where people they actively cheating. And it doesn't affect my race. My mileage and my time is just as legitimate, is more legitimate than their race. And for someone to pay money and go out and run a course, a painful, hard course, and then cheat the course, it's another cliche. Oh, you're cheating yourself. But they have something going on in their own life that they need to deal with, and just be grateful you're not in that place where you need to do that.
Yep. Well put. Yeah. There was actually one other big race controversy this weekend that was not in Utah.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about that.
Did you hear what happened in Amsterdam, the stadium race?
I did hear about it. Tell me.
Yeah. So apparently the race went off and runners were going through the course, and then some of them came across a locked door. And they're in a stadium. Where can you go? So apparently what they ended up doing was just determining that whatever their placement was, like 7 minutes into the race, was how the race was going to finish in terms of overall placement. So imagine if that happened in the U.S., the outrage that would happen, or if that happened in like some stadium series race at Dallas, for instance. That would just be insane. Who locks a door during a race?
Did they know how it happened? Was it an employee?
I don't know. I just saw the headline on it.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. That would we'd hear about that for a long, long time.
Yeah, that's I've never heard of anything remotely like you hear about people getting thrown off course because like the tape gets broken or it was just poorly marked, but to literally get trapped in like a stairwell because the door's locked, that's a first for me in OCR. I've never heard of that happening again, and it's a shame because that's one of the Europe doesn't have a ton of stadiums, so I'm sure a lot of guys were really, really bummed about it.
Yeah, and they, you wouldn't blame them if they didn't come back.
No, yeah. So that was the international controversy that happened, but I think the big story this weekend was all about Utah, and it was just as unpredictable as we thought it would be.
Jack, any last thoughts or anything you want to plug before we go?
I would say go to yanceecamp.com. I'm working on coming up with the most recent Utah rankings. I know it's been a few weeks. I've just had ridiculous amount of work outside of this project, just on my career. But those new rankings post Utah should be up really soon. And Yancey just messaged me about a half an hour ago saying that he's creating the new webpage to show the prediction results. So you'll be able to see how many people thought that Johnny Luna-Lima would actually win and who else got a bunch of picks in the top 5. So I think if I remember right, it was only 3 people picked that Johnny Luna-Lima would win. A lot of people picked him in the top 5, but it was still a surprise to most that he would end up winning. But the full results and all those prediction data points, those will all be available on yanceecamp.com really soon.
All right. Well, Jack Bauer, thanks much.
Thanks, Will. Good talking.
Jack, so good.
Yeah, that was a definitely a very Utah heavy episode. Normally we don't stick to like one topic like that, but I think
that was a big race.
I mean, it made sense. It was a big race. A lot of things happened as a result of it, and definitely, yeah, I think it went well.
Cool, man. I need to go put my kids to bed, but then I don't know if I can get this up tonight. If not tonight, then I'll get it up tomorrow.
That's fine. I just have like a 30-second question for you.
Oh, sure.
You remember how I was doing that comparison where it was like the average men's second place is about three times closer to first versus the women?
Right. Yeah.
If I was to like do an article like that, would you be interested in having that?
I would absolutely publish that. 100%. Jack, anything like that. I love that stuff. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I think a lot of it would just be tables, and I've been, like I mentioned right at the end, I've just been so slammed with work, and I've wanted to write stuff like that.
Yeah.
But if I give it to you and kind of explain what the heck's going on, if you'd want to maybe add some text to it, feel free. I'll try to pass that along.
Okay. Yeah. I'd love to look at it.
Yeah. Okay.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah, and then I could maybe do like some, hey, here's the overview. Like if you want more, go to Yancey Camp or something like that.
That'd be great. Yeah, I'd love anything like we can give them like a short, 250, 300 word article, as long as you want. But even if it's short, we can take that information, and then if they want more, they can go to Yancey Camp. That'd be great.
Yeah. Okay.
Awesome.
Sounds good. Yep.
Jack, thanks so much, man.
All right. We'll talk later, Will.
Talk to you later.
Yeah. Bye.
Well done, Jack Bauer, as always. Hey, special shout out to IGJ.OCR for leaving a review for the OCR report on Apple Podcasts. JOCR writes, great podcast, news, rankings, and everything you need to know about the sports elite. Thank you, Jay. And also to Jeff Lifts MCC. Jeff writes, straightforward OCR reporting and industry insight. 5 stars. Easily the best reporting on all the many corners of the OCR world, clearly delivered. It's my go-to for OCR news. Thank you, Jeff. Jay, I forgot to say that you also wrote 5 stars. If you'd like to leave a review for the show, go to Apple Podcasts, search for the OCR report, click our logo, then scroll down to click Write a Review. I will read it on a future episode. We will talk with you soon. Go spend time with someone you love.